Wonderful, thank you so much. Allow me to quickly share my screen. And on this screen, first and foremost, you'll see a couple of house rules for anyone who just joined. Please know that the participants, if you're a participant here, you will be muted, and the current presenter will be talking. You will have the opportunity to reach us through the entire session, through the Zoom chat and Q&A. So please do send your questions and comments in that chat going. My wonderful colleagues here will be monitoring that chat. And equally, if you have any questions related to that, please put that in that chat. With that said, welcome again and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tomasz Mikeni. I am a very proud member of the DBCS, the Design Business Chamber Singapore EXCO, or Executive Committee, and a recent member here, so I'm very delighted to be here. When I'm not moderating sessions like this, I am an associate professor at SMU, at Singapore Management University. I'm a professor of communication management, and I'm coming from a design and design background, a design researcher and designer myself, working in industry for over a decade before coming back to academia, where I have a lot of great and bright Singaporean students that I get to interact with. If I'm losing my voice, that's because I've been teaching all morning on exciting topics like that. But luckily, it's not me you want to hear about, but we have a wonderful panel of guests here who will be talking to us today. This is the program that you see here. So we are already 2 minutes ahead of the schedule, guys. So it's a very exciting conversation, hopefully. After my quick introduction, I will give the floor to Keith O, who will be talking to us about the overall challenges and design inspirations by way of an introduction, followed by the challenge statement presentation and case studies for each of our 2 challenge statements of our distinguished panelists. Now, you as the audience will have the opportunity to ask questions throughout, as I mentioned in the chat. So please do send us your questions and comments throughout the event, and we will circle back on these Q&As either directly after that first case study or after the second case study towards the end of the program for both of those topics. So just keep on those questions coming and we'll do our best to address them all. Let me introduce the panelists who I'm so excited for them to be here. So as I mentioned, Keith O, who is a fellow EXCO member here at DBCS. He is also the head of product design at Carousel. And he is incredibly kind. This is something you should know about him. So much so that when I asked him, how would you like to be introduced? Instead of talking about himself, he talked about his wonderful team at Carousel and how, as a point of interesting tidbit, that his team created a donating project within Carousel where people can donate things for those in need. And he was very excited to tell us about the different prototyping ideas that went into that and how they figured out how people give and take with much kindness. So I'm very much hoping to hear a lot of similar things from Keith. After that, we will be hearing from Yi Ling, who is at the partnership team at MCCY, the ministry. And she is going to give us a very broad overview of the religious and racial landscape and trends here in Singapore. And one thing to know about Yi Ling is that she is a mother of 3, and that is 3 cats. So it's really exciting. I was thinking right after when she said that you know, it's like one of my favorite shows where you have the mother of 3 dragons. She's the mother of 3 cats. So wonderful to have you here, Yi Ling. Thank you so much. She will introduce us to the topic, followed by a case study presentation by Basil. And Basil is an amazingly diverse background, and to that end, he is designing for incredible diversity. And within his allocated time, he will attempt to give us 3 quick case studies to share with us. So very much looking forward to those 3 case studies. And something interesting about Basil, that he and I both were in the same city in San Francisco, where he visited a university, the University of San Francisco, that is a Jesuit school. And something you should know about Basil, that he shared with us, that he used to be a monk, a religious monk, for 9 years of his life. So he's very trained and professionally, certainly authentic to talk about the topics of interreligious and interracial topics. Great to have you here, Basil. Followed by his presentation, we're going to hear from 2 people. So Michelle Tay will, who is leading the partnership team, this is also the Associate General Secretary at the Singapore Kindness Movement. She will be introducing us to the topic, and then Dr. William Wan is going to talk more in depth about the different roles of good design in building and sustaining about these neighborhoods. And the 2 interesting things about these 2 wonderful presenters, Michelle is a mother of 2 humans, 4 years old and 5 months old. So certainly a very, very busy individual, and nobody would blame her if any of the children would come in during this time of home-based learning. So she and I share this responsibility for sure. And then Dr. Wan is a person that everybody describes as somebody who is a representation of kindness keeps everybody young. So great to have both of you here, and we're looking forward for your presentations. All right, allow me to give a very quick introduction to DBCS. We are an organization here in Singapore that was originally established back in 1985. Back then, we were called the Designers Association of Singapore, that then later on in 2012 got renamed to its current name, Design Business Chamber Singapore. And we are Singapore's one and only multidisciplinary chamber. And our focus is really to bring together the design professional with business communities. So what we do here, we like to say with our tagline, we do believe that better business can be achieved with design. And that is really the manifesto that drives us all to work towards this goal and bring together the wonderful design practitioners and innovators with our business leaders here in Singapore and the region. And to that end, you can see how our interest groups overlap between the design practitioners and the business world, and in between and all of that. And I'm sure we will hear a lot about this today, of solving social issues for the betterment of our neighbors, of our society, and the people all around us. And we'll look at technology as all around that enables this change. So, of course, today we're here to talk about the Singapore Design Awards, which is one of our flagship initiatives here at DBCS. This was, launched originally back in 1988 by the then Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew. And then this year's challenge, as probably many of you know, are co-created with 2 ministries. We had our first discussion a couple of weeks back with the Ministry of Sustainability and Environment, with great conversation there about 2 design challenges, which is recorded, and you're welcome to look it back on DBCS's website and on our YouTube channel. And today's conversation is co-created around the 2 challenges by the Ministry of Culture, Community and Youth, MCCY. And we're greatly appreciate their collaboration and working with us on these important questions. So for those of you who are considering submitting challenges, and I hope that many of you are considering submitting challenges, let me just quickly touch on how your challenges will be evaluated. You can see here the 5 criteria that our panel judges will be looking at for each of the submissions that we receive. So we will be looking at how much empathy and how you're addressing the human needs that behind these important issues. What is the inspiration and the impact of the product? So where do you get your inspiration? How much impact can be assumed by your work? And then, of course, as with every business challenge, we would be looking at viability and sustainability of your ideas. So it might be the most innovative and inspirational ones, but if it's not going to be viable and sustainable, it's probably going to rank lower on the judges' list. And finally, how do you integrate various systems into your project idea is going to be the fifth and final evaluation criteria. All right, and here are the big numbers. So those of you who are quantitative or just like to see big numbers, these are the amazing prizes that the winners will get. So each grand winner will get 20,000 Singaporean dollars from each of the ministry. Super exciting. And then there will be one winner per challenge as well, who will receive $10,000 of seed money. So we're very thankful for the ministries to support this challenge, and be even more excited to see all the exciting projects that will come in from the designers who are probably on the call right now. All right, a quick reminder, and then we can jump into the first presentation. So the design challenges, just to remind everybody, the first one is how might we as designers create spaces and experiences for diverse individuals and communities to interact and engage with each other meaningfully. There's a lot of great keywords in that design challenge, so I highly encourage all of you to ponder on what meaningful means, for example, and a lot we'll hear today about the diversity that's behind the motivation of this challenge. And our second challenge in this group, or challenge number 4, that's the Singapore Design Awards, is how might we as designers encourage more open, respectful, and constructive debates and discussions about our social differences. So again, please take a look carefully of the wording of the design challenge, and I'm particularly looking forward to our panelists discussing of how do they see this design challenge, what aspects do they find important, and we'll be having hopefully a lot of great conversations around it. All right, from this timeline, all you need to remember is right at the beginning here, October 16th. We are in the period of the open call for the Singapore Design Awards, so you can submit your projects anytime from now. We're excited to receive them, but you have time until the 16th of October. So please do submit your entries. And then you can see how following to that we'll be having multiple screenings, 2 screenings and presentations. And next year in March is when we are going to have the awards ceremony and networking event. All right, I'm going to finish up with this slide. So as I mentioned before, please do send us your questions if you have during this conversation. And if you, for any reasons, forget to do that during today's conversations, you can reach us with our email down there, info@singaporedesignawards.com. And please do visit our website, bbcssingapore.org, and also you can contact our wonderful secretariat with the phone number here. Do remember about the 16th of October. And with that, I think I'm really good on time. It should be inspirational for all our speakers today. I'll give the floor to Keith O to give us our introductory. Thank you.
Thanks, Tomasz. Okay. Can see the screen, right? Okay. So hello everyone. I'm Keith. Thanks, Tomasz, for the introduction. So for those who are not familiar with Carousel, just want to kind of give a quick introduction. We are a marketplace, C2C, where everyone can sell their underused items at home, right? So we hope, as a company, we hope that everyone can make selling and buying secondhand. They are like a lifestyle choice. So we feel that it's not just better for your wallet, but it's also better for the environment. So, and this is actually quite, I hold this quite dear to me because it fits my personal mission around designing for good, which also happens to be the theme around like Singapore Design Award. Like we started this really with the intent of like designing for good. Like we feel that design can be really, like we can really harness design to design for the good of the community. So prior to working in the digital product space, I was a consultant at IDEO. So I get to apply design thinking on many complex challenges, similar to the ones that you will hear from this, the speakers next after this. And so before you hear from them, I just thought I will warm up today's session with a short sharing on some of my thoughts about the challenges that I read, and also the inspirations to get you started. I'm sure there are many designers in the audience today, so I shouldn't have to, how to say, explain the need to understand people, right? Like everyone here should be sort of agree with me that we have to understand people, not just like what they say or do, but also like what they are thinking and how they are feeling. Especially when the topics are like what MCCY has posted here, right? They are highly emotional. We are nudging people to be more empathetic, towards one another. We are nudging people to have more open and respectful debates when sometimes the topics are actually very, how to say, can be very polarizing. So when we think about the challenge at hand, all the more we need to be very conscious of what people are thinking and feeling. And this is something that I do in my work quite often. Right? I study online human behaviors. And I'm very interested in this thing that people call Carousel, because I work in Carousel. So once again, for the people not familiar, so Carousel is what our users kind of give how our users nickname us. So you can go Google. There's a Tumblr site. It's a site where they compile complaints of their experience on Carousel. And usually this is about the other person that they're dealing with on the other end of the transaction. Yes, we know that when people hide behind anonymity on the web, sometimes they can do really bad things. So when my team went out and talked to some of these supposedly perpetrators, we actually learned that not everyone is bad. It's like in this space there's like 50 shades of gray. And I've met like a teenager who was just feeling a bit bored, and they did something maybe like mischievous. Maybe if the other parent, you just kind of give a kind of slap on the back of the wrist. That's about it. Like just a bored teenager. And then we also like met users who perhaps found that maybe some of the platform features were not working for them, and they were trying to get creative. And then so there's like a lot of reasons when we actually kind of remove the judgment and go and understand all these people that are supposedly bad. So that's my I think that's my kind of summary of like my thoughts about the challenges on hand. That it's like we really need to exercise like suspending our judgment on the people who we are designing for, so that we can better understand and empathize with them. Yeah, so kind of like hope that y'all can remember this as you think about the challenges. So my time at IDEO taught me how to look for inspiration, so which is what I'm going to move on and talk about next. And we had this classic story that we will always tell our clients. So during a project where we were working with surgeons, we brought them to see F1 and observe how the pit crew work together like a clockwork, right? So when the car like comes in, like everyone kind of just scramble together, everybody know what their roles are. And this later on helped the surgeons kind of better design like the workflow and the processes in the operating theater. And when I was working on so this was a project that has been shared around like by IDEO like very, very widely. And then when I was doing my own project at IDEO, I was designing for electronic medical record, electronic health record company in the States. And because it's like about case management, it's about like information organization. So I went to talk to a private investigator and learn how they manage their case files, how they investigate, find the murderer and all the stuff. It was quite enlightening. Like finding the murderer is sometimes can be similar to like finding like the diagnosis, like what is the thing that's causing you to fall sick. So we learn quite a bit from just talking to the private investigator. So the point of me sharing this is really wanting to encourage all of us to go look for inspiration like outside of the domain that we are solving. And like the best solution might not be like where you're thinking at this point. So next up, I will share a few inspirations. Like as I look at the challenges, I was thinking like, a lot of them center around communications, around emotions. So I was kind of looking around like past examples, things that I've come across. Maybe they are relevant. And so these are like, inspiration can be a very personal experience, right? I feel inspired when I look at them. So I just hope to share a bit of that process with everyone here, and hope this can also inspire you to think about other solutions. So these examples, they are mainly communications. They span across different disciplines like graphics, digital, spatial, like experience. Some I don't even know how to classify them, but there's something cool about it. But I will encourage you not to just stop at this definition, right? So just like go out and find even more and surprise us. Okay, so this is the first one. At the start of the circuit breaker in Singapore, a local design firm called Kinetic, they created a website, and then they got people to, you can go to the website, you download posters that look like this, and you print it out and you stick it on your door to thank your delivery person, like Grab delivery or whatnot. I love this project a lot because it's so simple, and it's something that a lot of people can do. I even saw people on Instagram putting up pictures of them, because they probably don't have a printer at home, but like some kid was redrawing, like recreating these posters using their crayons and putting it on the door. Yeah, I love this project because it's just so simple. The graphics isn't pretty in our traditional sense, right? It's not like the aesthetics, but I think the message here is really beautiful. Like how we, even like we can't see the person, like we can deliver a message to the other person. The next inspiration I saw was Humans of New York. I think a lot of people here should be very familiar. It's a very simple photo blog, and contain interviews with people on the streets of New York. And this is the one that I didn't know really how to classify, like, is it digital, is it experience, or what? But I think what struck me was how raw and authentic this is, right? And the founder here, he simply just used an online platform to spread storytelling and got people to be more aware of like the diversity of the people who live in New York. And later on, we all know that this project really like grew crazily, right, to like other cities. And I think there's also Humans of Singapore, people of Singapore, similar project as well. Then I move into like the more techie area, thinking like, because I mean, I work in tech, right? So there's something interesting about chatbots. Like this one is the Bus Uncle chatbot, where you can just kind of ping him and ask him anything about like, how do you get from point A to point B? He'll tell you the bus, he'll tell you the schedule. I thought there's something interesting about some technology like this, because you feel like you're talking to a person, but in actual fact, you're not. You can scold the bot and you will never get angry with you. Yeah, so I see those kind of like crazy like robotic video where people abuse the robots and the robots will never retaliate. But yeah, I don't know whether is it good or bad, but I think there's something intriguing about technology where you feel like you're talking to someone, you're expressing something, you want to find out some information, and you are not afraid to look stupid just because it's a robot. So going down the technology theme, I also looked at some of the more like machine learning and AI technology out there. So this is something I came across a few years ago. It's called Rethink. It's essentially it's a natural language processing technology that looks at the text messages, the Facebook posts that you're sending out on social media, and if it detects anything like the tone to be like bad, or like to anything that suggests like cyberbullying, you will ask the sender to just pause for like a few seconds and rethink, like, is this the message that you want to send out? And what is quite impressive is this was started by a 15-year-old girl who aims to eradicate cyberbullying. Then, so this one is a bit special, so I wanted to share a video before I talk about it.
You will soon be connected to a random Swede somewhere in Sweden. Hello, Sweden speaking. Ja, hallå?
I know a club. You'll love it.
It's morning here.
Yeah, I know a lot about hunting, fishing, and moonshining.
Listen to this!
1, 2, 3. That's how we do it. It's easy.
Bye bye. Thank you for calling Sweden.
Yeah, so I came across this this design or like this campaign like a few years back. I think this is probably 2015 or 14. I thought it was so cool. Like a country has its own phone number, and you can just call any citizen and ask about random stuff. And I think what was quite amazing also was how this really sparked curiosity from about like 200,000 people over the course of only 2 months. So this number only was available for about 70 plus days. So it's about 2 months plus. And it attracted like 200,000 people calling from Australia, China, US, asking things about meatballs, about random stuff in Sweden. Yeah, and thinking like, how something as simple as a telephone can just like when you pick up the telephone, you call, you talk, and you just get to understand something better. Then this one, and this is the second one. This is a campaign that cuts across different design disciplines. It raises awareness around the plight of seniors living alone in poverty. And what got me very intrigued was the pop-up hotel as part of this campaign. They designed it as part of the storytelling to get the audience to better empathize with the seniors. How when we design space a certain way, it's also a form of storytelling. And coincidentally, this is also a winner of our SG Mark award this year. So just some advertising here. So this last inspiration I have, so this came from a place where I went to school in Pittsburgh. So this is called the Conflict Kitchen. So it's a kitchen that serves food from the places that America is at war with. Yes, Tomas will say that it's a lot of places. Through foods and events. So they organize like, they really just show you like, these are the food that North Koreans eat, like Afghanistan people eat this kind of food. And so they will organize events around food, around dinner, lunches, and then with the aim to really bridge understanding between different culture. And I was also thinking, in a place like Singapore where we bond over food so much, like this is also quite interesting. Like actually, food is also a medium that we can design through. So really, I've kind of just spent the last 10-15 minutes going all over the place, like just thinking about like a design challenge and where it can lead us. And usually this is the phase that I feel that it's like very, very fun. Like you're not limited by any kind of physics or like logistics and whatnot, right? So really, I really hope as the teams here work on the design challenges, you will have fun, and this inspiration can spark some ideas on how you approach the challenges. So with that, I thank everyone here and good luck.
Thank you so much, Keith, for this great inspirational introduction for us to get those design challenges into the right mindset. And I think as a design thinker yourself, you're focusing on the mindset as well as the topic themselves. So thank you, Keith. All right, wonderful. I'd like to invite Yiling to present the statement 1 challenge, please. Go ahead.
Hi everyone, Yiling here. Hi, thanks so much for introducing me just now. Yes, I'm a mother of 3 cats, so I want to inform that just in case one of them might walk across the screen and something happens, I can't vouch for anything. Okay, I'm Yiling. I'm from MCCY. I'm from the team where we look at racial and religious issues, and I'm in the programming team. So I'm going to provide a good some context, provide a context of what's happening in Singapore, the racial and religious landscape, give you some sensing, give you a better understanding of what's happening and the efforts that the government and the local community has been working on. So that it gives you some idea. Okay, so I shall begin. Okay, Singapore, right? We all know we are quite small and we have a population size of 5.7 million. This was a census done in 2020. And we are religiously very diverse. And this is very true because in a survey in 2014, we happened to rank the highest in terms of religiosity in the world. On top of that, right, if we look at Singapore, we notice that there has been an increase in population where we are less religiously affiliated. And this is coming from the younger cohorts, the younger generation as compared to our older generation. I mean, as you can see the trend increases over the years. We also understand that our youth these days have a more liberal outlook compared to older Singaporeans. As you can see, the different kind of topics, the different kind of views that we have these days. But then, right, we are very heartened to know that our values largely remains the same. So key things like, filial piety, we are Asians, right? We are very considerate, we still value perseverance, we have self-determination. So these values are still important to all of us. But then if we look at things in perspective and looking at the more recent trends, we understand that there's been more racism, or rather people do still feel racism, especially at the workplace. So this is something that is in the society, and we will not say that it doesn't exist. So most recently, I think everybody's aware, right? In the past few months, I think mid of this year, there were some cases on racism. There were some cases on religious discrimination in the community, and it went on to several headlines. It was something that was quite worrying. And this was worrying enough for our Minister of Finance to make a statement that we cannot leave things as it is. But according to a survey in 2018, I mean, those cases were allowed because they were anomaly. But then in 2018, we had this survey done where we know that our trust level among our race groups and our religious groups still remains high. We still trust one another. So what can we do better? We definitely can do more, and which is why our PM Prime Minister, right? You can recognize his blue card. This was not at the COVID announcement. This was done at the National Day rally quite recently. He said that we need to move beyond tolerance towards mutual understanding, appreciation of different communities. So this is very important. And at the National Day rally, he mentioned he made 3 statements: that there will be a new Maintenance of Racial Harmony Act that will be coming soon. So this let's look out for it. There will be that there's a need for our Chinese majority to be more understanding of the minorities' concerns, because we need to leave the experiences of others to really understand what's happening. And that for our Muslim nurses in public healthcare, they would be allowed to wear tudung from November onwards. So now I'm going to talk about our programs. So what can we do together as between the government and the community? There's a lot to do, which is why I'm so glad that DBCS is organizing this SDA, the Singapore Design Award. Okay. For MCCY, right, maybe I will share with you, we have this initiative named BREACH. It's a very, very long word, so it's short for Broadening Racial and Religious Interaction Through Dialogue and General Education. This is very long, which is why we always call it BREACH, and it's pun intended, sort of. So it is a series of initiatives where we promote, we encourage ground-up groups to come up with initiatives to help foster better understanding of our differences, of our racial and religious differences, and build better understanding and appreciation of one another. So how do we do it? I mean, it sounds very nice, right? It's bridge. Okay. We have this fund, which is called the Harmony Fund, where we support projects that promotes racial and religious harmony. So it covers all kinds of programs, or it can be dialogues, seminars. We have facilitator training program. We have video series. So this video series, I think later on the next speaker, Basil, will share more. And we have Ask Me Anything session. So this is very interesting. A lot of participants find it very fun, very insightful, because you can ask the faith leaders, a panel of faith leaders, any question that you have always been wanting to ask. Many people find it very difficult to ask this kind of questions, but these faith leaders, they are very open and happy to share answers with you. So beyond that, right, what else have we been doing? So MCCY always look out for, opportunities to crowdsource ideas. So most recently last year in December, we held this Mission Unite hackathon. So the name itself says so. It's called Mission Unite, right? We want everybody to unite together. So at this hackathon, we wanted participants to come together. Anybody can come together to connect and collaborate, come up with solutions to build our social cohesion. So I think we had over 200, close to 300 participants, 40 over teams, and we selected 10 finalists, 10 teams, and funded them to crystallize their ideas. It's taking place this year, so it happened last year in December, so the projects are due for completion this year. We have some, so I picked out three quite interesting ones, and rather heartening to know. We have this interfaith.sg, right? This is by a youth team. They are very young. I think they are between poly to university age. They come from different religious organizations. And then there is, they develop a virtual playbook so that it can help readers, people who go onto the website to learn how to organize interfaith and race activities, so bridging people. Then there's Being Guest by Team Being Guest. This team is led by Basil, who's going to share more later. So he brings people on AR, VR tours to places of worship, which is also very useful right now in times of COVID, where we might find that entering places of worship might not be as accessible due to the limitations of the capacity. Then just now you mentioned, Kevin mentioned, right, kampong, about food. So we have another youth team. I think they are university students. They came up with a website because they understand that food connects and bridges everything. I mean, Singaporeans, right, we love to eat. So they came up with this website, a recipe portal to share recipes, and they link up with social welfare groups to get recipes from the older generation to share with the younger ones. So in a way, we have various kinds of content coming out. So do look out for them. So beyond that, what does MCCY do? We don't just look at our community alone. We want to promote social cohesion to the community. We also do it through the arts. And across sector, we also reach out to the sports. So this is how we try to develop more common spaces so that more respectful conversations can grow, so that people of different backgrounds can come together to do good. And then we build this inclusive community. So yes, this is the end of my presentation, and I'd like to check with you, find out how would you like to contribute to the community. Okay, so I think that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yiling. This was very insightful and interesting. I loved the different statistics you provided, and probably even more so seeing the images that came along with them. And the question is valid. So please, those of you who are on the call and conversations, I see some questions coming in, but do continue to put in your comments as well as your questions, and we'll make sure to cover them in our Q&A. Next, I would like to ask Basil to come on and give us those 3 case studies that we're all anxious to hear. So Basil, it's your turn.
Thank you very much, Thomas. So let me just share my screen. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Basil Kanangara. I run a very small social enterprise called Being Bridges. We do work primarily in racial and religious diversity, especially here in Singapore. I think we do a bit of work overseas as well, but mostly here in Singapore. So today's session is going to be about diversity in general, dialogue, and a bit of design and how that applies to this topic. First of all, about the work that we do at Being Bridges, right? So the work of Being Bridges is to engage, to facilitate, and to innovate. We develop tools for conversations, especially around cultures, religions, and ethnicities. We work within the landscape of diversity, dialogue, and slightly more difficult discrimination. Preamble, as I begin this sharing, I have no design training, so really I have no right being here. But in many of the projects that we do, we've had to design stuff anyway. We've been forced to design because everything's designed. And when you want to do a project, you have to think about how you're designing it. So I'm learning from a lot of trial and error. We have several ongoing projects right now. So today I can share with you a bit of an insider's view to what's going on behind the scenes, the problems that we face, the dilemmas, the decisions that we've had to make. And hopefully I can share some considerations for you, considerations that I've picked up along the way myself, and things that I'm learning from, and maybe you guys can learn. We can't squeeze that much into 10 minutes, so I'm going to try to just bring up a few pointers here and there. The structure of today's session, right? First, designing for diversity, the space of dialogue, and I'll show 3 case studies, 3 of our projects. Designing for meaning, the space of tension, and then designing for change, the space of transition. So first part, the space of dialogue. So very, very briefly, since Yiling has already shared quite a bit of the background, diversity exists, right? It's something we have to accept, but it comes with challenges. The thing we realize is that dialogue actually helps with these challenges. The issue here is that dialogue needs space. Right? And here's where design comes in, because design actually helps this situation with dialogue, because design affects space. Design affects the way space affects us, which I'll go into in a minute. So 3 projects, first of all, because these will be my reference points in the next 10 minutes. These 3 projects that we are that we are in the midst of doing now. Being community, I'll share this one first. Yiling has already mentioned that it's basically a video series, social media stories of racial and religious discrimination. So we get people to share their stories of discrimination, whether it's about race or religion, right? And we film them. They are basically sharing these in person, 1 meter apart, of course, because of COVID-19. And then we put them online on Facebook and Instagram, and we get this to be a stimulus, a trigger for people to share their own stories of discrimination in the comment section in Facebook and Instagram. So that's the second level of stories. Then in those stories that people are sharing in the comments, we also invite them later on to take part in a large Zoom discussion where we'll have facilitators, of course, and people get to share a lot of their angst, their suffering, but even like how they've recovered, how they engage with these things. We've finished most of the episodes, and in fact our very last event is tomorrow. So our culmination is tomorrow. The bottom right hand of the screen, you can see we've got a few guest speakers coming up, and myself and my partner will be facilitating these conversations with the Minister of State and a few other people who have either experienced discrimination or who are quite studied, quite experts in this field. So the link is there, fb.com, being.com, double M. If you want to take part, it's It's on Facebook Live tomorrow in the evening at 5 p.m. So just some advertisement. The second project, which Yiling also mentioned, right? We had the privilege of taking part in the government's Social Unite Hackathon last year, or Mission Unite Hackathon last year for social cohesion. And we actually won the top award for this, coming up with this idea of being guest, which is really virtual reality tours of religious houses of worship in Singapore. So this one operates primarily in the inter-religious space. You know, the previous project being community, that was race and religion. This one is primarily religion, where, you know, COVID-19, we've got issues with visiting each other's houses of worship, but we know from the surveys that we've done, the market research, that people believe visiting other people's houses of worship actually helps them open up. It helps them become more kind to each other's faiths, right? People who have not visited these houses of worship, as well as people who have visited these houses of worship, both believe the same thing, which is very interesting. But very few of us actually know that you can visit these houses of worship. Then those of us who do know, we've also realized administrative problems. Like sometimes if you want to visit, you have to call up a church, you have to organize a time, you have to explain why you're going to visit, you have to meet someone like 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. and this lady will have to like maybe show you around, right? She's taking time out from her own office work, right? So there are a lot of limited resources, and we thought we could help with bringing together these various assets, right? We become the middleman, we help with virtual reality filming 360 degrees of different parts of these houses of worship. We get the religious leaders to give some information, some talks, some sessions as well. And people get to visit on the headset. So we've got the VR headset right here. We've just had our trial run at Serangoon Secondary School. It was very, very good, very impactful even for me, you know, having designed this just to see the effect on the students. But besides the actual 360 degree view and traveling through these spaces, we've also got an animated VR, right? You see the Buddhist monk outside the temple there. So we call this Harmony Island, and people can visit different houses of worship there. Then in there, they click and they come to a local 360 degree view of a real life Singaporean house of worship. So that's the second project. I went a bit too long there, I'm sorry. And the third project, we call it Diversity by Default, is a deck of cards around conversations for diversity. So basically what we've noticed is sometimes to have conversations of diversity, especially interreligious and interracial, you need to hire the facilitators, you need to hire the space, you need to really organize it. We wanted to make it easier. We wanted to bring down the level of the intimidation, right? And make it more accessible. So that's why these cards, we've come up with questions that make it really easy for people to self-facilitate some of these difficult and sensitive questions. Interestingly, we are collaborating with a previous design winner of the Singapore Design Awards, right? Nicholas Pang, who designed the conversational cards called Small Talk. So this will be the latest reiteration of Small Talk, Diversity by Default, where we are also bringing together different parts or different aspects of diversity. So people often think of faith and ethnicity. We are also bringing in nationality, and we are also bringing in disabilities, because sometimes it's overlooked. So we want to bring all of these aspects of diversity into these cards. It's limited, it's still only 4. There are other aspects as well, but for now, these 4. And we've started having play tests online over Zoom. So these are like focus groups to really tweak the questions and the dynamics of these games. The hard copy actually comes out somewhere in February next year. Now, the issue with these 3 here that I've just shared, right? Or not the issue, something interesting about them, the idea of dialogue and space, which I shared earlier. If you think about it, being community, the social media stories of discrimination, it utilizes the online space. Being guest, the virtual space. And diversity by default, extra interesting, right? It's actually a portable space because it's a card game. You put in your pocket, you go somewhere else, and all of a sudden you open up a space of diversity. You can do it during like Chinese New Year or some HR department meeting, right? So it's really interesting the way space plays with dialogue and how we have to adapt the styles of dialogue to space. The next part, designing for meaning. Here I talk a little bit about tension. right? First of all, why do we call ourselves being bridges as a lead up, right? Because we want to make sure that it's not just about building bridges, but also about being bridges ourselves. So it's not just about the thing itself or even the space that we encounter, but it's about how the space affects us, or the meaning that we make out of the space, right? And so here's the main word for this section, right? Meaning. Why design for meaning? Meaning provides purpose. A meaningful dialogue is a purposeful diversity. One of our taglines for the card game, Diversity by Default, is that diversity isn't a fault, it's our default, right? If it's there, how can we make meaning out of it? How can we create purpose out of diversity? So now the tension of meaning, here's the issue. Diversity in its very essence is provocative because we're all so different, right? We can get into so many conflicts with each other. But dialogue leverages on a sense of safety. If there's not enough safety, it's very, very hard to have meaningful dialogue. So designing for meaning requires a very fine balance between the two. Here's something that I made up very quickly, like we had an issue with the card game, right? Some of our questions, right, might have been too difficult. Some might have been too safe, too boring. And so we came up with this idea, like, how do we make this a lot more engaging? And, you know, we are playing around. I actually drew this in my notebook, right? Meaning is made in tension between safety and provocation, right? Very low safety, very low provocation, not a very meaningful dialogue. If you have high safety, but very little provocation, also not that much of a dialogue because nobody has anything to talk about. Nobody's inspired to talk about anything. And if there's a lot of provocation, right, but very little safety, people hold back. Right? Also not enough meaning in that dialogue. The only way you can have really good dialogue is if safety is high and provocation is high, and then people want to share, but they also feel safe to share, right? So the question is, how do we make provocative spaces safer and even make safe spaces more provocative such that people can share these things, right? So how do we make meaningful questions between safety and provocation? One of our sample questions here, right? How civilized do you perceive Singaporeans to be? Immediately, people found that very provocative. So we had to make sure that the conversation started out safe. We designed check-in questions at the beginning, like what is your intention for being here? What do you hope to discover here? What is the diversity that you experience in your own friends and family? Those types of things, such that people are prepared, they feel comfortable to tackle the more difficult questions later on. You saw some of these pictures in the earlier presentation as well, and you might remember them, right? Now, these cases that came out in Singapore, they were very, very provocative. They got like lots and lots of responses over Facebook and Instagram and stuff like that. The issue here is that when you actually read the conversations, they don't seem very deep in terms of meaning. And there's a lot of aggression, a lot of volatility and anger there as well. So we came up with this idea of, hey, can we do something over social media where people feel safe as well as a little bit provoked to want to share, but share meaningfully? But it's difficult. I'll share this very quickly, right? I'm almost at my last 2 slides, but basically here we have somebody who does not seem like a racist at all, I must add. But a very interesting thing is that we were not able to properly engage with his comments, with his questions. And maybe because of that, he found us a little bit too critical or provocative for him. You see up here on the top right, to my opinion, the posting here seems to target the Chinese in Singapore. And we couldn't quite convince him that no, it doesn't. And maybe our language was too technical, that it did not make him feel safe because maybe he couldn't engage with it. He couldn't understand, let's say, the bottom part here, like we want to learn to be more empathetic and gracious. It was difficult. So he ends off by just saying, bye. I found this is useless Facebook page. Very noticeable, right? He obviously didn't feel safe with what we were doing. So the very last section, right? Designing for change, the space of transition. Right? Why do people seek a change of environment? Because our environment affects us. Like I said, space affects us. We change our environment, we change our behavior. But which environment specifically should we target? We've got Ibnur here in the picture. He's one of our design team members for being guest, the VR thing. When he put on the VR goggles, you can tell he was like in a whole different space, right? He was just experimenting with things. And when we tried it out with the students at Serangoon Secondary, the same thing. They were like feeling the wall, feeling everything just to make sure they were in the same space, right? We brought them to some place new and it opened them up to what they were looking at, what they were experimenting with. So here, my very last slide, actually, the space of change, right? The space of transition is a transitional space. What do I mean by this, right? Transitional space is that place where we actually change, where change occurs. But where do we get that space? What do we target? What I would call the space of transition, the bridge, the tent, the courtyard, because the tent is sort of like out there in the middle of nowhere, right? But it's not home, but it's not the distant, far off place as well. It's somewhat in between. Or you could see it as social media. It's like in between real life, but it's not somewhere far, far away. It's somewhat in the middle. VR is the same thing, and the game also. A game is like an artificial environment we create within reality. So transitional space is not neither here nor there. It is both there and here. It is both outside and inside, and I might dare say it is both objective and subjective. It utilizes the tangible, concrete, objective things, right? And our subjective aspects. And that's where we make meanings. That's where we derive change in that narrative space of transition. So change happens where these different polarities overlap. I would suggest that we design there or here or whatever you want to call it, but we design for that bridge or that tent or that courtyard. So that's it for today. Thank you very much for your time. My name is Basil, and if you guys want to chat or have a consultation about diversity in Singapore and ideas for projects, feel free to get in touch with me over Facebook on my link at the bottom as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Basil, for this wonderful presentation. You're very humbly said that you don't have a design background. I feel, based on these last few slides, that you have just invented design poetry. And I'm incredibly thankful for you for doing that and provoking our ideas for that. What I would say is that everyone on the call are encouraged and welcome to post questions and comments about what you have heard from our speakers. It's really amazing how these conversations can really propel you. So if you don't belong into this sort of more poetic design bunch of people, but you are more into the business of design and how do we get these design challenges addressed so we can submit our Singapore Design Award submissions, feel free to welcome, and you're welcome to submit your practical questions as well. So don't feel that you have to write in poetic language. You can ask some very trivial questions about SDA as well, and also address the wonderful points that Basil and Yiling raised earlier. So we are going to move forward with the second challenge statement now. So in a moment, we'll have Dr. Wan introduce us to the second challenge statement, and Michelle will follow that up with the case study. And we will circle back with Q&A after for both challenge 1 and challenge 2. So Dr. Wan, please take it over.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm trying to see if this is the right slide. Well, here we go. Thank you so much for having me. I am also not a designer, but I'm just intrigued by what Basil said. Wow, he's really something. It's a very difficult act to follow. I know very little about designing and a little bit more about kindness. I've been doing kindness work for the last, almost 11 years, so I should know a little bit about that. I want to talk about designing with kindness. My focus is not as virtual or as portable or as online as Basil's. I want to focus on the physical space. Singapore is a very small place, and I think there are many opportunities for us to take existing space and try to either redesign or design new spaces that can facilitate all that Basil has been talking about, including meaningfulness, purposefulness, harmony, and everything else. So let me see if I can do that. Okay. So the question for us is, how do we create spaces and experiences for diverse individuals and communities to interact and engage with each other meaningfully? So I want to, as I said, focus on the physical interaction and engagement. And so the operative words are to create, for me, for this purpose, the physical space, and create a real life experience, not virtual, but real. Well, virtual is also real experience, but I'm talking about, physical interface, connectivity, which is the engagement and the interaction. Now, the criteria given by this award organizer, there are 5 of them. You have inspiration, empathy, and impact. And then you have business, viability, sustainability, and systems thinking. Now, I like to think that the first 3 are people-centric, and the second 2 are process-centric. So my focus is on the people-centric part of things. And along the way, Michelle, my partner, will also jump in if she can to share some examples, so that we are taking 20 minutes together, starting with me. So people-centric or other-centered is what I want to focus on. How can we create spaces or recreate spaces that will cause people to want to come together? They're attractive, appealing, safe, and that's what people centricity is all about. Well, in fact, the way we define kindness, and I've written about it, it is other-centeredness. Just think about it. When you are empathetic, what are you doing? You are feeling with somebody. When you're thankful, what are you doing? You are appreciating somebody. When you're generous, what are you doing? You are giving to somebody, and so on. It's always about somebody else. It's not about you. Of course, you would play a very important role in trying to bring others together so that you can build this people centricity. But it's not about self-centeredness. It's about always thinking for the benefit of others. So that is what kindness is all about. So empathy, there is a Tagalog word that I learned when I was giving a talk in Manila. It's called malasakit. Those of you who know any Tagalog at all, or even Malay, you'll find a common word right there, sakit. Sakit in Malay is sickness, but in another sense, the Tagalog is using it as pain. Okay, so sickness and pain, they are sort of together. So it is to have malasakit or empathy is to be able to walk in the shoes of people who are suffering, who are in pain. I think it's a beautiful description of empathy and inspiration. Now, what we saw just now with Basil's presentation is we're inspired. It makes us feel like we're going to be enthusiastic. We're going to be looking into what can we do to design and create wonderful things. That's inspiration and an impact. Ultimately, whether it's religious harmony or getting people to understand each other's faith or to transcend racial boundaries, that's the impact that we're going to have on people. So how do we design spaces to do that? I think a reasonable proposition is to start by having us co-create. That is to say, we need to get people together and talk about these things. I mean, nobody has a monopoly of information or ideas or intelligence to be able to do it all by himself or herself. We need to come together. In other words, to build a community, we must start with the community. Then the spaces and experiences must then be co-created, inclusive, and equitable. I'll talk about that in a moment. So here are just some quotes that I've been reading up just for this little talk, because I only know kindness, so I don't know very much about design. So I read it up and I found some very interesting thing. The community is the expert. This is from the Project for Public Spaces. You want to start something like building a safe, viable, dynamic, enthusiastic, safe place for everybody to gather together to accomplish purposeful and meaningful endeavors. We got to start with the community. So it's a community-powered process for a people-centered result. So it's community building community. And in community building, trust is so very important. You know, if I don't trust you and you don't trust me, then we are in trouble. I mean, we can't even begin to talk because I don't believe what you say. I don't believe that you're going to keep your promises. And that's why conversations that Singapore has now become famous for, you know, from the government initiated to ground ups, we're always talking about having conversation, but people are asking. So we talk and we talk and we talk, but what do we do with those talks? In the end, do we follow them up? Do we keep promises? If we say that, yeah, this is something good, we're going to do it, are we going to do it? So keeping promises. And there's this thing about cultural literacy. Singapore is a small and beautiful place for many reasons. And one of the reasons for me is the cultural diversity. We are one Singapore. But in the very core of Singapore, we have the Malay culture, we have the Indian culture, we have the Chinese culture, and we have the Eurasian culture. And now, you know, we have, you know, people like Thomas coming from Hungary. We have people from the Americas. We have people from Africa. We are such a diverse culture. I think the more literate we are about the culture of others, the better it is. Now, one big advantage I think we do have is that Singaporeans are actually pretty well traveled. I think many of us have been to many countries in the world. And I think we learn a lot just being out there. And we are back here, we suddenly realize that the world has descended upon us. And how do we spend time, not in our own little ghettos, but create, if you like, the very heartbeat, the center, you know, of our own civilization in terms of a safe space for people of different cultures to come together, to have safe conversations, to interact without being judgmental, without feeling that, you know, you're a minority, but everybody is being accepted, you know, like, you know, it's the best thing, you know, in the world to see you, you know, that you are part of us because you're right here in our common space. How do we do that? I think design thinking can help. And so we begin with co-creation by having meetings, and the meetings that we have in order to co-create, that meetings itself must be inclusive. We must make sure that all kinds of people represented in Singapore somehow in small groups are as widely represented as possible. It's a good place to start. So what does it mean for a public space to be well designed? Is it about how it looks, how it feels, and for whom? I think design is important, but design is only foundational. Design is static. What gives design life is people. People make design work. People make design exciting. People breathe life into design. So in the end, it's still about people. So all these tools are important, but ultimately the benefit is people, all of us. So when we think of people and designing space for people, let's really be thinking very clear-mindedly about the fact that we all have differing abilities. Now we are still having problems with spaces, public spaces that designed for, you know, common use, that's not friendly to people in wheelchairs. I mean, that's something that we've been talking about for years, and we're trying to improve. There's still a lot of improving to go. A lot of that for the people who are blind, the people who are deaf. You know, there are still many challenges. We're not there yet. Gender dynamics. You know, I'm always amazed. You know, men, women, we are different. So we use our toilet. You notice how very often the toilet for women in the public space are usually long queued. Men is very short because men go in and out very quickly. Women takes a longer time. So why can't we design public space toilet with more cubicles for women? Why are we using the same number for men and women? You know what I'm trying to say? So here again, it's a bit of a common sense. It's a bit of being sensitive, you know, to the need of our women a part of our community, and being sensitive to their needs. And cultural activities too. You know, we have a wonderful opportunity to share our culture through food, through all kinds of stuff. Storytelling opportunities. You know, there are ways to tell stories. Now, here is one example that maybe Michelle, you know, you went to Bob's, what is that? Bob's, you know, that photo and video storytelling. Can you tell us something about it? And explain it. I think he's got a name for it.
Bob Lee's exhibition.
Yeah, Bob Lee's exhibition.
Yeah.
I think it's about autism, right?
Yes, I think he has an autistic child. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's called Finding What's Next Photography and Video Exhibition at the Esplanade Tunnel. Now, this is a good example of using a public space to the best use. But can you tell us something about that? Quick one. Storytelling.
I think what he tried to do was to capture images of Singapore and people with special needs to showcase his son's story. So his son is actually born with autism, and they used the space in Esplanade to present certain photos that he found was meaningful and useful. But I actually wanted to share
11 to 12 different families and individuals with autism.
Yes, yeah. But actually I wanted to share something more about space for all in terms of our HDB flats. It was very interesting because, you know, most of us, I mean, we are quite a number of young adults here. We all grew up playing along the corridors in our HDB flats. But if you notice now, Singapore's housing corridors have actually become smaller, and there's actually less interaction for us to interact with our neighbors because of space constraint. So, you know, ideally, if the space is big enough, there's actually more space for interaction. But with the lesser space now, we actually have findings that, you know, neighbors actually don't really interact with each other more because of the space. So like you said, you know, it's really about other-centeredness and thinking about others. If we have the space for conversations, there will be opportunities for us to do so as well.
I also think that corridors even in the old HDB flats can become cultural activity places. Now we have our own decorating the corridor for Chinese New Year, decorating the corridor for Deepavali, decorating corridor for National Day. So if you can get our neighbors together and decorate, you know, and then as you decorate, you share cultural activities because it's a particular special day. In Singapore, we celebrate so many special religious holidays. And if we can all do it together as neighbors, isn't that a good use of the corridor space? Now, in terms of the storytelling opportunity, when I went to see Bob exhibit, it was for 3 weeks. They spent a lot of money and effort with a lot of sponsors. And then after the end of that, he couldn't find any public space open for him to continue like a mobile exhibition. Why is that? You know, shouldn't that be recycled and be reused? Because not everybody went to the Esplanade. You know, there are other community centers, other places that can be used, and so that can be another storytelling opportunity. So we can think about that, you know, many times something is exhibited for a very short time and then that's it. Can't we just extend the life of that by bringing that story around Singapore? All right, so what's the best memory of your most enjoyable public spaces? Well, the happening place, you know, like there are a number of happening places. I think, what is that? Holland Village is one, right? I mean, you know, and there are all kinds of happening places. We can create eating places, hawker center. We are now in the cultural UNESCO heritage thing. Thankfully, now people are cleaning a tray, and so it's a much cleaner place. And affordability and cultural inclusivity and a marketplace. You know, I mean, in many countries, you know, small, what we call a community farmers market is very, very popular. People bring their own produce. Now they are doing produce, you know, in our own high rise, maybe rooftop, you know, we could create some of those vertical farming, etc. And you know, there are many more people into pottery and other craft. Maybe you could create a safe space even for a marketplace for people to start, you know, entrepreneurship in a very small way, and people coming together, not exclusively just to buy and sell, but to do many other things together and create that beautiful space for that. I think that we got to be thinking about that as well. I think it can be done. How do we, put our heads together and get more people interested? And I think the hawker center as an iconic heritage place is a good place to start. And why can't we extend that so that we take that hawker center and find whatever open space available around that hawker center and extend that into a place where, family can also come and, some may be eating there, others may be playing there and other activities going on there. And so, create that kind of environment for harmony and for building relationship. So I want to just talk a little bit about neighborliness and mutual aid. The space, the public space I'm talking about that's co-created by the community is to create neighborliness. Now, neighborliness to me is defined broadly. First, we all have neighbors, whether we live in housing estate or we're living in private enclaves, we have neighbors. Our space is so small that some of the spaces we almost literally can reach out and touch our neighbor's wall. So we are very closely knitted neighbors. The question we need to ask is, am I a neighbor to someone in my common space? So the common space neighborliness is also created outside the immediate neighborhood, where we create anywhere else, whether it's a hawker center or a community center or void deck, whatever it is, we create neighborliness when we create a common space for people together. All right. And mutual aid is about sharing resources with our neighbors. So we got to start with being neighborly before we can even talk about mutual aid, right? So what we do is that, with co-creating community, we are already building neighborliness. And we are already building social capital. Whatever talent you have, whatever gift you bring to the table, let's all share and enjoy each other's presence, each other's culture, each other's religion, each other's thinking, and have fun with each other, in a design space, and we develop, all these stuff that we are interested in. Okay. And if possible, we want to break down the barrier. I mean, people in housing estate and people in private estate should be able to come together in a common space and without any economic differences. So this is my final slide. So I'm thinking of space, what I call a space to place. Space to place. What do you mean by space to place? Corridors, for example, we can make corridor, as I said just now, a good space for sharing stories. Void decks, why can't we, have more makan sessions, at the void deck? I know there are health issues, but can NEA and others responsible there to think of ways to encourage that and making sure that food is safe, and we do potluck, whatever it is, bring people down together. Basketball courts, can also be converted. Schools, religious facilities, and if we open up, for people of different religious background to come together, we're also learning from each other. Community clubs, and somehow can we do all that? So these are some thoughts that I have. And so that's basically it. Now that's 20 minutes. So I'm going to stop right there.
Now, thank you so much, Dr. Wan, and thank you so much, Michelle, for this really thought-provoking, great presentation. I put away, we are all here to get inspired, to hear these stories, and for the folks who are listening to gather inspiration of what they could submit for the Singapore Design Award as a challenge. Just listening to this last presentation, I noted at least 4 amazing topics, right? Like you mentioned about the public toilet design, which certainly needs additional thinking. Accidentally, the most recent SG Mark, one of the winning participants, was about urinal design, so you could check that out as well. About SG Mark. I'm fascinated by another connection that you mentioned, Dr. Wan, around vertical farming. So just at the last conversation we had with the Ministry of Sustainability and Environment, we were talking about vertical farming, and we talked extensively about the design implications that we talked about. But what an amazing connection here, where vertical farming could also be a marketplace, right, for people to come together and do more than just commerce and do more than just a place to get our own locally grown food, but a place to come together and be connected to each other. And of course, the other topics you mentioned around public places to play and interact with each other and increase our neighborliness are all quite amazing. So folks, I think we can take away from this last conversation that the quote that I wrote down that Dr. Wong mentioned, that design is static and people make design dynamic. I just love that quote. So thank you very much for sharing that with us. We had only a few questions here that we had, and please continue to do so. I was just thinking about back what Basil said actually about safety and provocation. So maybe I need to provoke people more to submit their questions, and certainly want you to feel that this is a safe space. And we did receive one really thoughtful question for Jiajin, who I think our paths has crossed before in the past. But I let Basil answer this really interesting question about the difference between deliberate and accidental provocation. Could you address that, please, Basil?
Sure, no problem. And thank you for the question, Wu Jiajun, right? Yeah, so, technically there is a difference in those two types of provocation, one deliberate, one accidental. So there's a difference of intent. But I would dare say that the consequences may not be so different, right? It all depends, like I said, the balance with that sense of safety. So we've encountered this in all of my projects actually, right? That provocation could be really intentional. And if people felt could be really intentional or really accidental, but if people felt safe, right? There can be a very meaningful, very positive conversation that comes out of it, that opens people up, that bonds them, that creates friendships when people did not feel safe. And this is both, again, I repeat, like whether the provocation was accidental or the provocation was planned, very deeply, strategically planned, right? But if people did not feel safe, right, it backfired like crazy. Right? The consequence could turn out really negative. There can be people just refusing to speak, right? Refusing to take part in the dialogue. There can be people who are hurt, people who may leave very, very negative comments, of course, right? But we also feel bad that we may have caused some kind of conflict in that person's mind about the other race or religion in general, like when they apply their experience with this one person to the whole entity of the racial group or the religious group. So I'd say technically there is a difference, which is of intent, but in terms of consequences, it all depends on safety.
May I also jump in here? I think Basil has made a very good point. The consequences could be the same. But I think in the end, it's all about trust and relationship too, because I think that we're all humans. And I think that if I get to know you and I get to trust you, I think a lot of things could be started. And even if I made a mistake, you are very likely to forgive me. If I accidentally provoke you and you realize that, hey, I'm your friend, I'm not doing it purposefully to hurt you, and so on, you will be quite quick because you trust me to say, yeah, I understand. And then, and that's it. But if we don't trust each other and we are always suspicious of each other, we're not neighborly enough to each other, or we live in the same neighborhood, we never even spend a moment to say hi to each other. And of course, we create problems for ourselves. There was something else you said earlier on in your presentation, Basil, that you talk about meaningful engagement and meaningful dialogue and meaningful conversation. I like that. And I think that is also the other opposite side. Demeaning conversation.
Yes.
Demeaning engagement. And when you talk about demeaning, means I deliberately want to make nothing out of you. I demean you. I have no respect for you. I don't have trust for you. I despise you. That's demeaning, right? So the moment we don't have that trust and we start with this demeaning attitude, we cannot have a meaningful conversation.
Absolutely, and thank you for suggesting that term. In fact, while writing it just now, my answer to Jia-Jun, I was looking at, it can have really positive impact in terms of a meaningful conversation, or negative impact in terms of, and I got stuck. I couldn't think of the right word. So
Demeaning.
a demeaning conversation can turn out. And I will also add here, especially with the key topic of your work, Dr. Wan, kindness is so important to safety. If you've created a foundation of kindness previously in that relationship, in that dialogue, people feel so much safer to take part in the dialogue. Yeah.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much for both of you for saying that. We have 3 minutes left and I don't see any more questions. So I just wanted to reiterate some of our design challenges and some of the logistics that we have for the upcoming submissions. So here we go. You guys can see the design challenges, right? Is how might we as designers create spaces and experiences for diverse individuals and communities to interact and engage with each other meaningfully. And design challenge number 4 is how might we as designers encourage more open, respectful, and constructive debates and discussions about our social differences. All right. So I would like to invite everyone to have your submissions and think through of what you'd like to submit for this by October 16th. We are here as DBCS and all of my colleagues and everyone to answer any questions even after this conversation ends. So please do send us your questions and submit your submission by this date, October 16th. Here's one more time our email address, info@singaporedesignawards.com. You can go to our website, dbcsingapore.org, and contact us for any further questions. If there are nothing else, then I would like to thank our wonderful panelists for being here today and sharing that information with us and inspiring all of us, and certainly walk away with a wealth of exciting inspiration that I got from all of our speakers. And so thank you for that. And thank you for the audience for the engaging questions that came in and the support. We are ending this conversation right now. Thank you so much and have a wonderful weekend, everybody.